Turning the Corner, a reflection for the fourth Sunday of Advent. In our first reading from 2 Samuel, victorious David comes home from the wars and tries to rest. Fresh from the thrill of dancing before the Lord with abandon, he finds the sudden inactivity intolerable. With no enemies around to focus his manic energy, his mind seizes on a seeming contradiction. Here I am, living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God dwells in a tent. Nathan, acting the friend more than the prophet, gives David the go-ahead to do whatever he has in mind. That very night, the Lord provides a course correction. The oracle that Nathan delivers in the morning reminds David of his humble beginnings and of God's actions on his and Israel's behalf. It makes clear that the Lord needs no lofty dwelling made by hands. If one is to build a house for the other, it will be the Lord God building a house, dynasty, for David. The Lord goes on to spell out the terms of an everlasting covenant, one that cannot be broken by the sin and folly of David's descendants. This sense of perpetual covenant exists in tension with both the earlier notions of covenant partnership and the later experience of failed monarchy and exile. Only in Jesus do we see this promise fulfilled. Psalm 89 weighs in on the perpetual side, signaled by the first word of the refrain, forever, and then spelled out in parallel thought-rhyming phrases typical of Hebrew poetry. I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David, my servant. Forever will I confirm your posterity and establish your throne for all generations. The brief reading from St. Paul's letter to the Romans puts the house and throne of David in a much broader context, referring to the revelation of the mystery kept secret for long ages, but now manifested, and made known to all nations, to bring about the obedience of faith. In Paul's parlance, the mystery means the inclusion of Gentiles in the promise of salvation. Indeed, through the Paschal mystery, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the throne of his forebear David is transformed into the universal reign of God. Today's gospel follows the great tradition of birth stories from Israel's history. We might even point to the body of a simple maid from a backwater village as the tent in which the Lord God chooses to dwell. Next comes the silent night, the holy night, the night of mystery long hoped for and dreamed of, that brings us to the turning point in our dark Advent waiting. An inner stirring from the manger cave presents us with the Incarnation, a bright hope birthed, according to our ancient stories, in the heart of this night. We hear of two simple people exhausted by a long journey, forced by necessity to spend the night in a cave or partly exposed shelter, who bring to birth a child with nothing to protect him but rags and straw and the warmth of nearby animals. The mystery of God's infinite love is here made manifest in a fragile, vulnerable infant. This child will be hounded out of his homeland and return unnoticed. He will grow in wisdom and endeavor to build a peaceable kingdom, only to be misunderstood and thought a stumbling block. He will suffer and die at the hands of his enemies and fall into the arms of God, only to be raised in glory.